It's time. So many of you know that for the past couple of months I have been detailing on my blog my playthrough of a user-made story on the episode app called The Teacher. It's about a girl named Mia Rose. She is a senior in high school, and other than that, I don't know much about her. Actually, no, that's a lie. She's a terrible human being, and she somehow has 3 different men who are willing to drop everything and make her the center of the universe. Apparently, this is like the #1 rated user-made story. It's got over 3 million reads. I'm not really sure how that happened, but okay, I guess people really like cliche stories more than I give them credit for. Now, to be fair, this is not a personal attack against the author. She seems like a very nice girl, but this story kind of sucked. And I am not going to go into every single plot detail. I already did that on my blog. Instead, I am going to be talking about what I thought of it overall. I understand that it's a pet project, but when I hear that, I kind of get a little wary because in my experience, pet project equals I really wanted to make this, but I kind of forgot that other people are going to be reading this as well, and I kind of just catered to my own needs and didn't really care about anyone else. And I mean, you have to have a certain level of selfishness when it comes to your art, but you also have to be self-aware. This story is kind of a perfect storm of what the hell. My main issue with this story was just the overwhelming fan base of Team Daryl fangirls. There's nothing wrong with standing for a fictional character. I'm guilty of it, you're guilty of it, but there's a line that needs to be drawn between complex, well-rounded characters that have a beautiful character arc, and then there's people like Daryl Collins. Basically, like Christian Grey 2.0. He is a very disgusting, egotistical, overbearing jackass, and I don't understand why people like him so much. I really don't. Like, honestly, I'm not kidding when I compare him to Christian Grey. I read through some of the Instagram comments. People were comparing him favorably to Christian Grey. Think about that for a second. We all know that 50 Shades of Grey is basically a glorified trilogy of emotional, physical, and sexual abuse. So to see someone who is in the same vein as Christian Grey being portrayed and having all of these girls think he is just so romantic and so mysterious and that someone needs to fix him, it worries me. Also, it was just extremely uncomfortable, and I honestly just wanted to bash Daryl's face with a frying pan every time he was on screen, but that's just a personal taste. I'm sure not everyone wanted to do that. And I'm an asshole. Daryl is old enough to know right from wrong, and he needs to find it within himself to change. And by the end of the story, we realize that he really hasn't. And honestly, it was kind of refreshing to know that, because the entire time, I just knew he wasn't going to change. The second biggest problem that I had was the fact that this entire relationship was just, oh my god. Mia getting involved with Daryl the way she did was just very inappropriate, and not to mention illegal. I don't care if she's 18, she still shouldn't be getting involved with somebody who is actively teaching her. Yet the story was adamant about not even bringing this up half the time. This bothers me because we're dealing with 2 adults who should know better. And yet they choose to do something that they both know is wrong. But it shouldn't matter, you say, because they're in love and stuff. It's not all on him. I know he is technically the adult in this situation, but Mia actually is kind of self-aware at the end, like a little bit. She says, I shouldn't have gotten involved with him. It's like, No, really? She is supposedly smart enough to know that she should not be getting involved with him, and yet she does it anyway because I don't know. But I guess that leads into my biggest problem with this story. My biggest problem was actually Mia herself. Mia is like Bella Swan and Anastasia Steele mixed in with Bianca Piper to create this hideous mutation of sociopathy and disgust. I honestly have nothing good to say about her. She is just a terrible, evil person. And the thing is, I don't think she was meant to be that. I feel like she was meant to be this normal girl. But honestly, I did not care for her at all. I found myself hating her as the chapters went on because honestly, she was supposedly the smart and caring and very intelligent and very astute, self-aware, amazing person. But all I saw was somebody who lied, someone who put herself first constantly, someone who was willing to get someone else fired for the sake of her own selfish needs, someone who was willing to dick around with 3 different men. And I'm not saying that she is a skank. I am not slut-shaming her. What I'm saying is that she clearly had feelings for all 3 of these guys that she was involved with, and she consciously made the choice to continually be romantically involved with all 3 of them. It was just obnoxious. And she even says at one point, I know it sounds greedy that I'm involved with all these 3 guys, but blah blah blah, it's okay, I'm Mia. Like, if she's with one guy, she's usually thinking about the other 2, is basically her attitude. But then it also got to the point where I realized that Daryl was just as awful, if not worse than Mia, and I wanted them to end up together because I wanted them both to be miserable human beings together. And that's really where the story fails, because if you choose Daryl at the end of the story, Daryl and Mia get married, they have a kid together, well, another kid together, I guess, and then Daryl falls into his old ways, he starts gambling and drinking, and Mia decides to divorce him after 3 years. And a lot of girls got upset by this. The author stated that this is kind of what I was going for all along. I wanted to lead up to this to show you that this is usually what happens in these kinds of situations. And I mean, yeah, it sucks, but it's actually kind of satisfying for me because I hated them both in the first place, and now they're both miserable. But the problem is that apparently Mia finds somebody else later on in life who deserves her and will treat her right. See, my problem with that is that Mia does not deserve that. Like, we have already established that she is just an awful human being who should not be allowed to have any kind of romantic relationships with anyone other than Daryl, who is, on her same level of emotional maturity. I guess my problem is that I didn't feel like Mia deserved anything better than Daryl. And she really doesn't. She doesn't learn anything in this story, she just continues to be her awful, selfish self. She's just an awful person, and half the time I was making choices that were basically trolling her because I didn't like her at all. I wanted her to suffer. I think it's kind of telling that that happened, because as a writer myself, I know one of the most important things that you have to keep in mind is you have to make your main character relatable and likable. Because otherwise, your readers are not going to want to follow this person around. I have no words for how much I hate Mia. I have no words. And apparently if you choose Sam or Will, you get a happier ending, which I guess is great, but at this point, they deserve better. Like, honestly, I remember in one of the later chapters, Will gets a girlfriend, and I was like, oh, good for him, he finally moved on, and Mia was acting like this was the worst thing in the world. Like, she was honestly so upset because she, suddenly owns Will because they've been friends forever, so apparently that means that she owns him. Property of Mia is tattooed on his forehead. So another girl coming in and stealing him or whatever is apparently earth-shattering, and she hates it a lot, and it makes her sick. She doesn't even attempt to be happy for him, and that sucks, man. She treats Will as her failsafe. As his best friend, or supposedly his best friend, Mia should have been supportive. She should have moved on with her life. I mean, everybody is always on and on about how responsible and mature she is, but really she wasn't at all. It just kind of worries me because, I know at the end, the author was basically saying, you are your own teacher. You are teaching yourself these awful habits of picking awful people to be with and blah blah blah. And I feel like I understand what the message was. Honestly, if Mia had been a lot more likable, I wouldn't have picked Daryl. I easily would have gone with Will because, Sam was okay, but honestly, Will was the better person. But most people reading the story thought he was too predictable and boring because suddenly being a decent human being equals predictable and boring. I wasn't aware that kindness and respect was on par with watching grass grow. It just kind of worries me that all these young girls having this idea in their head that their true love is some disgusting, chauvinistic asshat who doesn't treat them right. And I understand what the author was trying to do at the end. Like I said, I think it was fine, but it doesn't work because the main character doesn't work on any level. If she was a villain, then yeah, she would definitely work. But she's not. She's supposed to be the everyman. She is supposed to be the person that we want to see happy at the end. And I didn't want that. I wanted her to suffer. I wanted her to be unhappy. And that's exactly what I got. So I guess in a way, I got what I wanted. At the same time, it still bothers me that I had to put up with this shrew for 40 chapters. How does anybody get past the first chapter thinking that this is gonna be good? And the only way you're gonna get better as a writer, or as anything really, is if you practice and if you listen to criticism and if you work hard. So honestly, I'm not saying that this was the absolute worst thing I've ever read, but it was kind of like a Lifetime movie game, almost. And I feel like with work, the author could really improve and do something better. But as is, it's just not very good. It just isn't. If we have any more female protagonists like Mia Rose, we are in huge trouble.